am delighted to be here with Master Desmond Barry Williams. if only I memorised that. I'm really delighted to be here with you. I'm Rasheed, I'm a coach, speaker, author. We met not long ago at one of my events at the British Library, and you're only there by chance because somebody else was supposed to be there.
Yes, that's right.
And I know this is going to be an interesting interview. You are a martial arts expert, hence the master, because you're a master within martial arts. I'm just trying to think where we should begin. How long, if I can ask, have you been involved in the world of martial arts?
Gosh, since, wow. Since 1976.
Since 1976.
Yeah.
So how did it seems from just how you answer that, as though your whole life has been about
it's been revolving around that for such a long time, and it's just kind of got in my head on, you know, when I actually started doing it. But I remember 1976 because that's when my brother was born.
Right.
And I was in Cubs at the time, and I remember because there was a caretaker that used to be outside, and he used to do, I think it was taekwondo or karate, and he said to me, how high can I kick? Because he saw us doing some silly moves because we watched some cartoon or whatever Hong Kong Fu.
Hong Kong Fu, I remember it.
We watched Hong Kong Fu.
Yeah.
I remember me and my friends, we did something.
Yeah.
And he said, do I know anything? And I said, I just know how to kick. So I remember he made me kick against a tree and a couple of times, and then I went back inside and was in our groups for Cubs. And then when I went home, my dad said that my brother was born, and then I remember the following week I went to Scouts. Yeah. And it was in a big hall, and opposite there was a place that was doing Kung Fu, and was in the Scouts. So I thought, I hear all these, and so I looked through the window and seen, I'm going to try that. So I went. So the following week, I didn't go Cubs. I didn't go Scouts. I went to the Kung Fu class, and that was my first proper experience of Kung Fu.
Wow. And how old were you at the time?
I'm really bad with dates.
But you were young, isn't it? For the Cubs and Scouts.
Yeah. I mean, it's 1976.
Right.
Because 1976.
Right. So this is very interesting. So from a very young age, you were Cubs and Scouts, and then this happened. How high can you kick? And then you found yourself going to like would you say it was a Kung Fu then?
It's called Shoulder and Fist.
Right.
And there was because there's a couple of teachers there, and it was really interesting because this is where it all kind of like was meant to be, because after I went to that class, then the following week in school, they showed they were going to have a. Or was it? No, I'm thinking actually further along. When I started going to secondary school, I was still going like maybe once a week to the Kung Fu classes. It wasn't consistent because kids are you go 1 week, miss another, then go a couple of, and then it wasn't really consistent. And then there was this film which we watched because one day we had what's called film night at school, and it was to do with Chinese culture. And they showed a film, and it's called Crystal Fist. And after I saw that film, I said, that's it. Right,
then that was the moment you were hooked.
Yeah.
In the intervening years, from what I know, and it'll be interesting to know, you're a black belt in which particular is a field linked to, is it karate or Kung Fu? I know there's something
Kung Fu.
To Kung Fu.
Yeah.
There's a whole range of the martial arts, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that you're widely experienced in.
That's right.
And you've been given all sorts of awards for your Kung Fu. Can you just tell us a little bit about where is it that you're now in that journey? Because again, that the first thing that you described, many people might recognise. It's interesting. In the 70s, we had a lot of exposure in terms of martial arts, didn't we? Bruce Lee, etc. And lots of people were turned on by martial arts, karate, judo, Kung Fu, and so on. And so many people may have experienced that of first of all going on to class and so on. What they won't have experienced is spending then a whole lifetime in martial arts and getting to the stage of mastery that you have. Can you tell me a little bit about about the things that you've achieved in your career. I know you're very modest about that, but just to give people a bit of a picture of where it is that you're at now in your practice.
Well, right now it's because I've got my own martial arts system, which is called Nanfang Kwanto, and that's mainly a Southern Kung Fu system, but also with Taekwondo, Muay Thai, and Karate. So that's martial arts. I've integrated all into one system.
Right. And did you have to? Did that mean you had to master all of those individual types of things? Has your journey taken you into all of those different areas of martial arts?
Yes, it has. I mean, I started off in karate and judo at school when I was young, but I didn't really take it seriously because it was just like, get thrown on the mat, so it hurts. And then karate, because that was basically one of the things that they kind of introduced a lot. But then when I went to secondary school, it was that's when I actually came across Kung Fu more, because that was when the vibe was going on about Kung Fu films and all these little things. And what actually kind of drew me to it was after seeing that film Crystal Fist, it made me open my eyes, saying that I want to be him. And then that was the whole journey of starting to go classes, but then didn't go, and then to and fro for a couple of years, and till I got into probably like the 3rd or 4th year into secondary school. I kind of took it seriously, and then that's when hip hop culture was coming to the UK, so was getting more interested into hip hop and break dancing and doing graffiti
and I would imagine one of the links between that is that those things, the hip hop and all that kind of stuff, getting very, very dynamic. So I can imagine that somebody who's into the martial arts would be very skilled to be able to do that kind of stuff and very, very comfortable with all of that stuff. So did that feel very, very natural?
I mean, it was. It's quite interesting because when you do all the moves when you do body popping, you lock. Same thing like when you punch, you lock your body, and so the two things kind of integrate because they're both movements, and how you deliver the movements. Then you have your own form, your own style. So when you do that in breakdancing and body popping and that, then it looks funky.
Got ya. Well, it's interesting. So you. Your first exposure to martial arts was when you were very, very young. You dipped in and out of classes, and then when you were in your early teens, it sounds, that's when it kind of gripped you and you began to take it very, very seriously.
Yeah.
You've got to a point in your career now where you have your own school and your own style of martial arts. I'm really keen to, after this interview, to do a series of interviews with you in which we can kind of understand martial arts far more deeply, because already there's a number of things that you flagged up, some of the different types of martial arts. And we had a brief chat earlier on today, and you were highlighting that some things that we might call martial arts aren't technically martial arts, so it'd be good for us to explore that. The one thing I want to kind of flag up at this point is to find out that when many people are young, they want to do martial arts and so on because it's cool and because they'll come across as very strong. Tell us a little bit about the spirit of your own style now, which I understand is holistic and it's about people being far more at peace. Can you again tell us a little bit about what it is that you do now, where it is that you are at with that now?
Well, what it is, it's called Nanfang Kwanto, which means Southern Fist.
Right.
And what it is,
Nanfang Kwanto.
Nanfang Kwanto.
Yeah.
And what it's what you call a hybrid system. But then again, what is a hybrid system? Because everything is a hybrid in martial arts. People don't seem to realise that it's a hybrid system because you've mixed it or whatever. But when you look something from its original core to what it is now, it's integrated to something else. So it's an upgrade. It's always changing. It's never the same.
Yeah.
So what it is that it's my journey through martial arts. It's Hakan Chen or Southern Kung Fu is which I specialise in. So that's Wing Chun, Pak Mei, Southern Mantis, Hong Gar, Tai Chi, Bagua. they're kung fu systems. They're the systems that I've known and I've mastered.
Well, it's so interesting. Even when I recognise there are many people viewing who perhaps aren't an expert.
Yeah.
The Tai Chi, people might think is something completely separate from kung fu, from how they might see people. So it's interesting again how all of these things seem to interweave. Yeah,
because the thing is that a lot of people know about kung fu, but they don't really understand about the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, because you got to have the balance in between too. Because you've heard about Tai Chi, but then there's Bagua. A lot of people don't hear about Bagua that much, and then when if they do know about it, then they do understand, but they don't seem to understand that Tai Chi is the feminine and Bagua is the masculine, and that's where the balance is. And to learn the two, that's where you have the balance. When you do something slow, relaxed, calm, that's the feminine. So that's and then when you go to the opposite, where it's fast and furious, and the movements is much more stronger. That's the masculine. And then when you put the two together, then you've got the balance. So that's the yin and the yang.
Well, that's fascinating already. I mean, I want to kind of ask then, can you tell me, and I know in the series we're going to be looking at lots of these things in depth, but also kind of simply so that people can understand them quite simply, because I would imagine that there are all sorts of reasons why people may well be drawn to martial arts: health and fitness, self-defense, and perhaps the spiritual, the cultural kind of aspect of that. I want to ask, what actually, when we're talking about martial arts, what are martial arts, and what's the root of martial arts?
Well, the whole term martial arts is talking about all fighting systems as one. When you look at it in another term, you have kung fu, which is basically everything that's from China, and then outside of China, then you have what's called martial arts.
So it's kung fu in itself, and is it an umbrella? Is kung fu an umbrella, or is it the one unique style, the one style that it emanates from China, and then others are from outside China?
That's right. So basically, kung fu comes from China. That's where it all starts from, and then you have karate, judo, which is indigenous to Japan. Then you have Aikido, Taekwondo, which is Korea. Then you have Muay Thai, which is Thailand. Then you have Silat, which is Indonesia. And then you have Eskrima, which is also from the Philippines. So you have all these different systems because once when they come out of China, then they classify as something else because they're now changed into a different system.
And was China the birthplace of where we first saw these what you call fighting systems, or were there other things going on from what we know?
There's history is kind of vivid. So some people say that Kung Fu started in China. Some people say Kung Fu started in Africa. Some people say Kung Fu started in Egypt. Some people say Kung Fu started as far away as Peru. But people don't seem to realise that in ancient times people never used to write down things. It used to be verbal or passed down. They used to be very, very little notes. And if it's documented, then it's there, and people will find it and say that this is what it is, and this is how. So everyone has their own views.
I see.
But when you look at it in the proper view of Kung Fu in itself, Kung Fu basically started in China, and you heard stories about a monk called got his name.
He'll come back.
Information overload.
Yeah, he's going to come back. Yeah,
it'll come back. But basically, he came from India, and he brought a set of exercise which is called Lohan to the Shaolin Temple, because when he came to the Shaolin Temple, he saw that a lot of the monks weren't really fit, and they were quite, they're suffering when they're doing a meditation because how they eat and everything. So he showed them a set of exercises which is called Lohan style, and these exercises were primarily yoga exercises, but also qigong exercises. And what it does.
For people who don't know qigong, what that is?
Qigong's like a breathing exercise. And what qigong means, it means moving energy, or energy movement. So you're moving the energy inside your body. Easiest way to explain Qigong is that you ever have that sensation you've got butterflies in your stomach. That's your Qi, that's your internal energy. And if you learn how to make it move around your body, then it makes a weak part strong.
Right.
So you have like pins and needles in your fingers, that's your Qi, that's your energy going around your body.
And I'm sure we'll end up talking about energy, and what you're saying is absolutely fascinating, because I'd imagine that there is so much here and here. So I think I'm already fascinated by by the journey that this kind of series will probably go on. You had said that lots of the root of it was in fighting systems. So with what we call now martial arts and all these things, was it derived from people who are having to battle either in life or to protect themselves? Why fighting, from what you've learned? Can you just tell us a little bit about the fighting systems? What's the origin of that?
Well, it goes way back, probably 4,000 years,
right.
And there was an emperor called the Yellow Emperor, and he first documented about medicine and the holistic style of the person, and also he talked about how people can defend themselves by doing certain techniques, and so that was the first mention of Kung Fu. From there, then it's once again it's kind of shaped, because everyone has their own different versions or own different stories of how it arrived. But you have the three different segments of Kung Fu, because you have the northern, you have the southern, and you have the internal. So those are the three main systems in Kung Fu. There's thousands of styles, but they're three main systems.
Okay. And so that's but when you were talking there and sharing that story, you talked about what struck me about that story from that emperor was it seemed to be again holistic. This holistic.
Yes. The thing is that what I've found, during my years of studying, is that martial arts has kind of been stripped apart, or Kung Fu has been stripped apart. So all its original elements are no longer there. And what a lot of people are learning is, I'm not putting anything down, but it's just saying that it's mainly geared towards children, because the whole grading system of how they start from white sash and the black sash,
these are the belts.
These are the belts, and this is for morale boost and how for them to get to this level. But when you look at it in general, is that basically when you first learn Kung Fu or martial arts in general, you should learn about yourself. And learn about how you should be eating, learn about different medicines, learn about the history side, learn about yourself before you actually start training.
Right.
Because the thing is that when you go back to its grassroots of how it used to be taught, all these different elements are no longer there.
Right.
And, like learn about Chinese medicine, learn about different herbs.
Right.
It's all about prevention.
Right.
When you go to the gym, have a personal trainer or someone gives you instructions. Okay, this is what you do. This is what you don't do. This is if you get injured. This is this is the first aid kit. And so basically, in Kung Fu or martial arts in general, there's no first aid kit. So you don't have a first aid kit. You just come, do the exercises. You get strong. And then you progress, and then after a while, then your body can't take that continuous pounding. Then you don't do it no more. So the way I see it is basically when you first start doing martial arts, you learn about yourself, the holistic side, you learn about how you should be eating and everything else. Then you move on to the exercises of how to do your basic foundation, and then you move on from there. Because when you asked me earlier about Nanfang Kwanto, you asked me what it actually is, which is basically...
So this is what you're teaching. So do share then, for people who come to tell us what is it you're teaching and what you're advocating.
It's what I call movement, meditation, medicine.
Right.
Movement is how you move. When you talk to someone, or when you argue with someone, or when you fight, you have a certain posture, your stance, everything's a movement. So you have to understand how that person moves, how you move, how you react to it. So that's the whole movement part of it, and it goes on and on and on. Next part is meditation. And meditation, that's your mindset, how you think, how you analyse things, how you look to yourself, and so that emulates out. So then you put the two together, that equals medicine. That's your medicine. It's not medicine as in you take this medicine.
That's one in which one's able to be very much at peace and in good health.
That's right.
In good health by knowing oneself and by being attuned to oneself.
That's it.
Right.
So once when you put those two together, the movement and the meditation, that equals your medicine. So that's what I'm trying to get through to everyone, is that you put the two together, that's your medicine. It's
what you're saying is absolutely fascinating. Sorry, you were going to add.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it's absolutely fascinating. One thing that I guess that many people who are looking in on martial arts get a sense that whilst it has been, particularly in the West, let's say, used for self-defense and to extent self-esteem for people and so on, that there is something deeper in it. So even though people may not know, that there's this sense about something deeper, and what our observation is, lots of people who do that kind of stuff, including lots of people who may have perhaps had anger, issues and so on, they seem to find in it all sorts of disciplines, and they tend to become more peaceful people. Now, what I want to kind of ask and find out from you is that, from your studying of it, was that part of the intent? So, for example, at some point you talked about yoga and so on. We know from yoga that yoga, the intent of that is to really help that person begin to understand themselves, mind, body, and spirit. And again, people often limit it to thinking about the body.
That's the thing, because the whole holistic thing was all together as one. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, medicine, acupuncture, acupressure, Reiki. It was everything, all of that. When ancient times, a master had to know, Feng Shui, Chinese astrology, all of that. And when they know all of that, then they can actually call themselves a master, because then they understand the whole thing.
So now you've led me into a question that I'm fascinated by that, because I just intuitively get a sense of that. I get the sense that your journey to the point of the master, which you're called now, has been quite a traditional journey. Is that fair to say? Because there'll be many people who talked about the belts in the schools and so on.
I mean,
how did that happen? Were you, because presumably you just went along to schools like most people, but then it sounds to me as though then you, and I've heard little bits that when you came onto my events, you talking to a couple of people, but I get a feeling that somewhere along that journey, instead of going to the schools or the classes where you get this belt, that belt, and that belt, and that belt, and clearly there's the belts, you talked about black belt and so on earlier, but I get the feeling that you've somehow gone on that deeper journey, which is often, a deeper spiritual journey. Has that been the case? Can you tell us about that?
It's quite interesting, because I didn't realise that I was going to end up where I am right now, because I always had this vision that learn some kung fu, learn how to fight, and
that was the goal when you were a teenager.
Be like Bruce Lee, and be like a superhero.
Yeah.
But
which is very common, isn't it? I think there's so many people watching this, and that's the first thought, isn't it?
That's it. And that's kind of where it all goes wrong, because when people have that mindset, then everyone thinks about UFC and all the fighting, which is not what kung fu is about. Kung fu is not about that at all. What kung fu is to show you a way of life of how to bring balance, and also not bring balance to yourself, but bring balance to your family and to people around you. And people will respect you because of your true morals, and you being in touch with what's going on around you, and having that balance. That's what kung fu is about. The fighting aspect is the last resort. That's just to make your body strong, and for you to endure any kind of pressure. If someone's shouting at you, or someone's trying to argue for you, or tries to get you into a situation, you always center yourself, you're calm, you let it go, and then you move on. And so that person can't actually affect you, so you just become just like Teflon. So this just comes off you.
You touched on this earlier when we were speaking. It's almost that I think you said something which was, and it resonated with me. I got the sense from what you were saying is that when someone, this is my paraphrasing, when someone truly understands himself and understand life itself, and they're really attuned, then others see that, and they're not going to, you're probably going to be peaceful, and you're probably going to emanate peace. And therefore, rare is are people going to bring trouble to your door? Because you may also bring healing and understanding and compassion. That's what I get a sense of from what you're saying.
That's it. Because the thing is that when you train in a certain way, because I'm not going to go into the technical side of it right now, but when you do kung fu or any kind of martial arts, is that your energy generates into that balance, so you have the yin yang, so people feel that positive energy from you, they won't feel that negativity, and so you come in tuned, either that person comes in tuned with you, but when they try to affect you they can't, because you have your boundary, your energy is so balanced that it's hard for that person to impregnate that and cause you any kind of problems.
And that's fascinating, because I was just thinking that in the age that we live in now, just on a day-to-day level, people find themselves in so much stress and all sorts of things, because it seems that they don't have that energetic awareness. So, even within their families or within their relationships or in the workplace, everything can seem to affect their energy.
That's it, because the thing is that people take it on board. So they become like sponges, so they take on that person's problems, and then it just keeps on bouncing back, and it confuses that the person's body can only take so much without that person actually realizing that they're absorbing too much bad energy in order to let go. Because if they're attached to something and then that affects them, then that's going to make them all go wobbly.
Fantastic. Tell us. This is already fascinating to me. I'm so much enjoying this conversation. And for me, it's really leading nicely into the themes that I would like us to talk about in this series that we're going to do. I think it would be really good for us to explore and to understand things like energy, to understand and again talk a little bit more about martial arts, and perhaps it might be useful if you highlight what perhaps different of those martial arts, particularly many particular things that that you think are elements of them that's particularly worth bringing to people's attention. I think it would be good for us to explore if people are wanting to go to a school, what to look out for, if somebody's going up or being trained personally, also what to look out for. And some of these holistic aspects. But I think one of the things that I'm really keen to find out from this first kind of conversation, this interview with yourself, is a little bit more then about going back to your journey.
My journey is an interesting one, because for the way that I've been taught is kind of unique, because it's very hard to find a teacher that will teach you the way that my teacher taught me.
So how did the teacher come about? Because most people, I would imagine, you go along in the West, you go along to this particular school and you talk about the belts that you go along, and you get that, and you end up with your black belt or whatever, and that's that. But I get the feeling your journey is completely different, and you talked about how years and years and years of mastery, hence the title master, because very, very few people I've met and thinking will have that title. So clearly there's been a huge journey in that very traditional spirit of master and student. I can tell that, and I think people and many people who are fascinated by martial arts, who've looked at it, will be intrigued about that. So can you tell us a little bit about those steps of what happened next and along your journey?
Yeah, I'm going to really summarise it and skim over it really quickly. Because when I started learning Kung Fu when I was probably 10, 11.
Yes.
And as I went along, it was, going to lessons to and fro. And then it wasn't until I got into my mid-teens that I actually took it up seriously.
Right, yes.
Found a Wing Chun school, and I started learning Wing Chun because that's what Bruce Lee learned.
And so Wing Chun, just for those people who are trying to place it,
it's a southern martial arts system, and it's all basically based on blocks and techniques and how to maneuver yourself. So basically, it was. Quick recap of history. Wing Chun was the name of a Buddhist nun. That's where the name Wing Chun comes from. And she basically made the system created for the frame of a woman. And so, but the thing is that she taught it to other people as well, so it became more effective. But then it depends on the size of the person, because if you're too big, it doesn't work. But anyway, I'm not going to go into the technical side. Sure. And so I started learning Wing Chun. Then I kind of got lost in the whole breakdance and culture and everything else. And then a couple of years later, I bumped into one of my friends who's saying that he's learning this really strict system called Southern Madness. And I said, oh, okay, I'll come along. Came along and I met the teacher, and he kind of intrigued me from how he presented himself and how he went about doing certain things. And I said, yeah, I really want to learn from him. So once again, it just became like a regular class, just went to the class and everything. And then one day I said, you know, was talking, a group of us that went, said, you know, have anyone ever tried to learn from him privately? And said, yeah, we have. And so I said, you know, let's see what happens. So we asked for private lessons, and I remember this will stick in my head forever. He said to me, yeah, come to my shop, because his family ran a takeaway shop in East London, and you know, he'll teach me something. So I went there, and I remember I went to the side door into the kitchen area, and he had this big potato peeler, and he said, okay, he'll teach me something. He said, peel these potatoes. So I took the potatoes, put it into this potato peeling machine. Potatoes came out and everything else, and then put them into the bucket and let it soak. And then he made me go into a horse riding stance, which is basically, horse riding stance is just to get off the chair. You stand like this and your arms like this, if people can actually see, and then and keeping your back straight. And he made me hold it for as long as I can. My legs was trembling and everything. Wow. And then he made me do a couple of blocks, and then he said, that's it. And I said, what? Is that it? That's what I said to my wife. I didn't say it to him verbally. And then I said, you know what? This is it.
You sensed that the training had begun. Yeah. You sensed the training begun. And for me, it sounds like, from what I've heard and read, that sounds like the classic masters of the Zen and the thingy tradition, isn't it? Of that teaching the student.
That's right. But then then from there, it became a journey. So from him, I learned quite a lot. It wasn't only Kung Fu that I learned. I also learned about Buddhism, also learned about Taoism, learned about Chinese astrology, learned about Feng Shui, learned about I Ching. I learned so much, and it wasn't until I actually sat back and said, oh, I actually know all of this. And then, you know, I was also teaching for him, and teaching all the different things, and doing, you know, Chinese astrology for people. And
by this time, how old were you at this time? Just to give people an idea.
I was in my mid 20s.
So already this has been many years.
Yeah.
I mean, how many years of training of that did you undertake?
No, actually, no. Sorry, I was in my 30s.
Okay. So this is so we're talking about, I think you said before, something like 17 years.
Well, when I actually started. Okay, let me get this right.
Yeah.
When I actually started with my teacher, who I learned so much from, that was 1986. So from 1986 until 2012, that's the period of time that I was actually with him. And so, how many years is that?
That's a lot. I wish I could do my maths, but it's like, let the mathematician, but it's over 10 years, like 14 or something years.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the first part of when I first in the 80s was like, you know, doing it, not doing it, going to the class consistently. Then I went to live in America because I went to study over there, and then when I came back in the early 90s, a continuation with it. I went back with him and the continuation of it, and so I would say for when I came back, that's when the second part of my training actually started, and the whole bulk of what I learned was during that period from the early 90s until 2012, I guess.
You know, it's fascinating, because you know the thing that's coming into my mind, it's interesting that mine would bring this up. When we were, again, talking very briefly over the phone before, you know, you talked about how martial arts is taught is particularly for children and thinking, you talked about the belt system and the course. And if you think about it, not just for children, but I guess how a lot of the way we grow, isn't it? We get this belt and we get that thing, we can progress, and we get this thing, you know, and so on. Was that process happening here? I'd imagine that this process is way beyond that. Were you getting those? Because most people are thinking, what am I getting? I'm putting all this work, I understand all these things. Where are my belts? Where are my accolades?
Yeah, I mean, there is a grading system, because the way when I started as a white sash, and you know, went along those grading systems until I got to black sash. So you know, there's still the progression of that, but it was the time periods were long. It weren't like, you know, after 3 or 4 weeks, after a month, you learn the next, you know, you get your next grading or whatever. Because you know, the first, you know, from white to green was really didn't take that long. But then when you got to the intermediate senior level, then that's when you had to put in the harder work, and you had to wait and be patient, and you know, wonder, when is he going to teach me? When is he going to teach me more? And so, you know, all of that came into consideration. And you know, there could be a time scale between like maybe 2 or 3 years, and you haven't moved anywhere, you're still on that same level, but actually you don't seem to realise you've actually learned something, but you don't actually realise because you're not actually thinking about it, you're just thinking about it.
Because this then, I mean, what I get a sense of this, what we're really talking about here is mastery. And so, for example, when people call you by that, because you're a master, you've lived it, you've breathed it. It's like the things that they take, it's like the things that they say in my old field, music, it takes many years to become an overnight sensation. It takes many, 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 many years. And I guess that with so many things, we want that instant. And to really, for one to master life, that oneself, and life, I certainly know as a for me in my own kind of discipline as a coach, one, first of all, needs to personally go on their own self and their professional thinking journey, and it takes many, many years to get to a point of really being at peace. And depending how deep one wants to go into that journey, because I resonate with that, one can either go off and just study this and train to be, but to really be, I mean, this resonates with me because I meet so many people in my fields, I'll be careful about this, but you know, there'll be some people who, you know, want to deeply be it, because I guess what we're talking about, we're talking about the human condition. We're talking about what it is to be a rounded human being who's at peace with themselves. And then when you add in all of the physical dimensions, as with your field, that's considerable.
That's it.
I mean, I want to ask, before we begin to wrap this up, because I could speak to you for ages, and before we then point towards some of the things that we'll talk about in when we do the individual ones. And I'm really looking forward to you demonstrating and showing us just some things, because I think people will be fascinated by that. But tell me, I guess that one thing is, if we could round up that story.